Most people with diabetes focus on sugar and carbs, but there's one mineral that quietly controls how well insulin actually works, and most people are deficient without knowing it. When this mineral is low, blood sugar stays higher, insulin resistance worsens, and nighttime spikes become more common. Even if you're eating right, the shocking part is this mineral doesn't just affect blood sugar during the day. It plays a major role in what happens while you sleep. When insulin sensitivity naturally drops and the liver releases more glucose. In this video, I'll explain why this mineral matters so much for diabetics, how a deficiency makes blood sugar harder to control, and why restoring it often leads to more stable nighttime and morning readings. Let's start with what this mineral actually does inside your cells, because this is where most explanations go wrong. Most people think blood sugar control starts with food, what you eat, how many carbs you cut, how strict you are at dinner. But none of that matters if insulin can't do its job inside your cells. And this is where this mineral comes in. This mineral is involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the human body, but one of its most important roles is something most diabetics are never told about. It acts as a gatekeeper for insulin signaling. When insulin reaches your cells, it doesn't automatically work. It has to bind to insulin receptors on the cell surface, trigger a signal inside the cell, and then allow glucose to move from the bloodstream into the cell. This mineral is required at multiple steps in that process. When levels are low, insulin may be present, but the signal is weak. Glucose stays in the bloodstream longer. Blood sugar rises higher and stays elevated longer than it should. This is one of the hidden drivers of insulin resistance. And here's the problem. Up to 50% of adults are deficient in this mineral, and the rate is even higher in people with diabetes, prediabetes, metabolic syndrome, or chronic stress. Why? Because high blood sugar itself causes the body to lose this mineral through urine. The higher your glucose runs, the more you excrete it. So diabetes doesn't just coexist with deficiency, it actively causes it. This creates a vicious cycle. Low levels weaken insulin signaling. Weak insulin signaling raises blood sugar. Higher blood sugar increases mineral loss, and the cycle repeats. Now let's talk about why this becomes especially important at night. During the evening and overnight hours, insulin sensitivity naturally drops. Your muscles are less active. Your metabolism shifts into a fasting state. Your liver becomes more involved in maintaining blood sugar. That means insulin has to work harder to keep glucose stable. But if this mineral is low, insulin is already struggling. So instead of glucose being absorbed into cells, it lingers in the bloodstream. At the same time, the liver senses resistance and begins releasing more glucose, thinking the body is running low on energy. This is why many people go to bed with decent numbers and wake up higher, even without eating anything overnight. The issue isn't dinner alone. It's impaired insulin signaling combined with nighttime physiology. This mineral also plays a critical role in muscle glucose uptake. Muscle tissue is one of the largest glucose sinks in the body. When muscles are responsive, they pull sugar out of the bloodstream efficiently. But without adequate levels of this mineral, muscle cells become resistant to insulin signal. Glucose stays in circulation instead of being stored as glycogen. That means higher fasting numbers and more variability overnight. There's also a nervous system component. This mineral helps regulate the balance between the sympathetic stress system and the parasympathetic rest system. When levels are low, the nervous system becomes more reactive. Cortisol rises more easily. Stress signals stay elevated longer. And cortisol directly raises blood sugar by telling the liver to release glucose. So deficiency doesn't just affect insulin, It indirectly raises blood sugar through stress hormones as well. This is why people with low levels often experience nighttime restlessness, poor sleep quality, early morning awakenings, higher fasting glucose despite careful eating. It's not random, it's biochemical. And here's the part most people miss. Even if you eat well, exercise, and follow a low-carb diet, you cannot out-diet a deficiency that interferes with insulin at the cellular level. Until this mineral is restored, insulin resistance remains harder to reverse. In the next section, I'll explain why diabetics are so prone to deficiency, the everyday habits that drain this mineral without you realizing it, and how to tell if low levels may be affecting your nighttime blood sugar, even if your labs look normal. If this mineral is so important for blood sugar control, the obvious question is why so many people are deficient without knowing it. The answer is not because people are careless. It's because modern life quietly drains this mineral faster than the body can replace it. And diabetes accelerates that loss even more. The first reason is chronic glucose exposure. When blood sugar runs high, even moderately high, the kidneys filter excess glucose out of the bloodstream. But glucose does not leave alone. This mineral is pulled out alongside it. The higher and longer blood sugar stays elevated, the more this mineral is lost through urine. This means people with insulin resistance, prediabetes, or diabetes are losing it every single day, often without symptoms at first. Over time, levels fall low enough to impair insulin signaling, muscle function, and nervous system balance. This is one reason diabetes tends to worsen gradually. The deficiency feeds the disease. The second reason is dietary depletion. Many people assume they get enough minerals from food, but modern food is not what it used to be. Soil depletion has reduced mineral content in vegetables by as much as 20 to 80% compared to decades ago. Processed foods, which make up a large portion of modern diets, contain almost none of this mineral. Even people eating healthy may not be getting enough. Leafy greens, nuts, seeds, and whole grains are natural sources, but intake has to be consistent and adequate. And for people avoiding grains or eating low carb, intake often drops further. The third reason is stress. Stress doesn't just raise blood sugar, it directly depletes this mineral. When cortisol rises, the body increases mineral excretion to support nerve signaling and adrenal output. Chronic stress, poor sleep, emotional tension, and even excessive screen exposure at night all contribute. This means people who are already struggling with blood sugar are often stuck in a loop. Stress raises glucose to glucose, increases mineral loss to deficiency, worsens insulin resistance to blood sugar, becomes harder to control. Aerostress increases again. The fourth reason is medications. Several common medications used by people with diabetes and metabolic issues reduce absorption or increase loss of this mineral. These include certain diuretics, acid-reducing medications, some blood pressure medications, long-term metformin use. None of this means these medications are wrong, but it does mean mineral balance is often overlooked. Doctors focus on glucose numbers, A1C, and medications. Mineral status rarely gets attention unless levels are extremely low, which leads to the fifth and most misleading reason. Blood tests often miss deficiency. Only about 1% of this mineral is found in the blood. The rest is stored inside cells, bones, and tissues. So someone can have a normal lab value while still being functionally deficient at the cellular level, where insulin signaling actually happens. This is why many people are told everything looks fine while symptoms continue. Elevated fasting glucose, nighttime spikes, poor sleep, muscle tension, fatigue, sugar cravings. The labs don't show what's happening inside the cells. There's also a timing issue. Deficiency affects blood sugar most strongly at night, when insulin sensitivity naturally drops and stress hormones rise. During the day, movement and meals can temporarily mask the problem. At night, the weakness is exposed. This is why the same person may have acceptable daytime readings but wake up high again and again. It's not because they failed. It's because the system lacks support during its most vulnerable window. Another overlooked factor is aging. As people get older, absorption of this mineral declines naturally. Kidney excretion increases, muscle mass decreases. This combination makes nighttime glucose control progressively harder with age, even if diet stays the same. This explains why many people say, I didn't change anything, but my fasting sugar keeps getting worse. Something did change: mineral handling. Now here's the critical takeaway. This deficiency does not cause dramatic symptoms right away. It works quietly. It slightly weakens insulin response, slightly raises stress hormones, slightly impairs muscle glucose uptake. But over months and years, those small effects add up. By the time fasting glucose is consistently elevated, the deficiency has often been present for a long time. In the next section, I'll explain how this mineral specifically stabilizes nighttime blood sugar, why it works differently at night than during the day, and what makes the difference between helping insulin and overstimulating the system. This is where most advice online gets it wrong. To understand why this mineral is especially powerful at night, you need to understand one key thing first. Nighttime blood sugar is not controlled by food alone. It's controlled by hormones, the liver, insulin signaling, and the nervous system, all of which behave differently after sunset. This is why many people go to bed with acceptable numbers and still wake up high. After dinner, several changes happen automatically. Insulin sensitivity drops, muscle glucose uptake slows, stress hormones become more active, and the liver takes over as the main regulator of blood sugar. This mineral works because it targets each of these nighttime weaknesses at the same time. First, it improves insulin signaling, not insulin production. Insulin works like a key and a message. It binds to the cell and tells it to absorb glucose, but that message depends on minerals inside the cell. When this mineral is low, insulin may still be present, but the signal becomes weak or distorted. At night, when insulin sensitivity is already lower, this problem becomes amplified. Glucose stays in the bloodstream longer, slowly rising while you sleep. This mineral strengthens the signal inside the cell, allowing insulin to work more efficiently without increasing insulin levels. That's important because high insulin at night can actually make insulin resistance worse over time. This mineral helps glucose move where it belongs instead of forcing blood sugar down aggressively. Second, it directly affects stress hormones, especially cortisol. This is the part most people don't realize. Many nighttime spikes are not caused by food at all. They're caused by cortisol telling the liver to release glucose. Cortisol normally rises slightly in the early morning to help you wake up. But in people with insulin resistance, poor sleep, inflammation, or chronic stress, cortisol rises too early and too strongly. When cortisol rises, insulin sensitivity drops, and the liver releases glucose, even if blood sugar is already high. This mineral calms the nervous system and reduces excessive cortisol signaling at night. Lower cortisol means the liver receives fewer emergency signals to dump glucose into the bloodstream. That alone can reduce fasting blood sugar by a noticeable amount in many people. In a moment, I'll explain why this matters even more if you wake up thirsty, restless, or anxious at night. Third, this mineral supports muscle glucose uptake during rest. Most people think muscles only absorb glucose during exercise. That's not true. Muscles are still metabolically active during sleep. They continue using glucose for repair, energy balance, and cellular maintenance. But insulin resistance weakens this process. This mineral supports energy production inside muscle cells, allowing them to absorb glucose more efficiently even while you're resting. That reduces the slow overnight buildup of glucose in the bloodstream. Fourth, it helps restrain overnight liver glucose output. The liver is responsible for most nighttime glucose production. Its job is to prevent blood sugar from dropping too low while you sleep. But with insulin resistance, the liver becomes overprotective. It releases glucose even when levels are already elevated. This mineral improves insulin's ability to signal the liver to slow down glucose release. Instead of dumping sugar unnecessarily, the liver becomes more responsive and controlled. This is why many people see better morning numbers without changing what they eat for dinner. This mineral doesn't act like medication. It doesn't force glucose down. It doesn't override the system. It restores communication between insulin, muscles, the liver, and the nervous system. That's why timing matters. Taking it in the evening aligns its effects with the exact window when blood sugar becomes unstable, during sleep. In the next section, I'll show you how to use this mineral correctly, the most common dosing mistakes people make, and how to combine it with one simple nighttime habit that dramatically improves results. Knowing that this mineral works at night is only half the equation. How you use it determines whether it actually lowers nighttime glucose or does almost nothing. Most people who say it didn't work made one of three simple mistakes. The first mistake is taking it at the wrong time. This mineral is not meant to be taken in the morning. Morning use targets daytime insulin sensitivity, which is already higher due to movement, light exposure, and cortisol rhythm. Nighttime glucose problems happen because insulin sensitivity drops, cortisol rises, and liver glucose output increases after sunset. Taking this mineral in the evening aligns it with the window when blood sugar becomes unstable. The ideal timing is 30 to 90 minutes before sleep. This allows the mineral to calm the nervous system, support insulin signaling, and reduce excessive liver glucose release during the first half of the night. That's when most silent glucose rises actually occur. The second mistake is using the wrong form. Not all forms of this mineral behave the same way. Some forms are poorly absorbed, some are stimulating, others pass through the body without reaching the tissues that matter for blood sugar control. The form that works best at night is the one that is gentle, highly absorbable, and calming to the nervous system. Stimulating forms can actually raise cortisol slightly, which defeats the purpose. Poorly absorbed forms never reach muscle or liver cells in meaningful amounts. This is why people sometimes say, "I tried it and nothing happened." In reality, the body simply never received the signal. The third mistake is overdosing. More is not better. At night, the goal is not to force blood sugar down. The goal is to restore balance. Too high a dose can cause digestive discomfort, restless sleep, or paradoxical stimulation. That stress response can increase cortisol and push glucose higher instead of lower. A moderate, consistent dose works better than a large one. This mineral works cumulatively. Its effects improve over several nights as insulin signaling and nervous system balance stabilize. In a moment, I'll explain how long it usually takes to see results and what signs to look for beyond the glucose number. Another common mistake is pairing it with late-night snacking. If you take this mineral but continue eating carbohydrates late at night, you blunt its effect. The liver receives mixed signals. One signal says slow down glucose production. The other says digest and release more glucose. This creates noise in the system. If you need something before bed, a small amount of protein works better than carbohydrates. Protein provides satiety without triggering a significant glucose rise or insulin demand. This allows the mineral to do its job without competition. Sleep environment matters more than most people expect. Bright screens, late-night scrolling, or emotional stimulation raise cortisol. If cortisol stays high, the liver will continue releasing glucose regardless of supplementation. This mineral works best when paired with basic sleep hygiene. That means dimmer lights, reduced screen exposure, and a consistent sleep window. You don't need perfection, you just need less stimulation than usual. Hydration also plays a role. Mild dehydration concentrates blood glucose and raises stress hormones. Drinking water earlier in the evening supports better overnight glucose stability without disrupting sleep. Now here's what most people want to know. How fast does it work? Some people notice lower fasting numbers within a few nights. Others see gradual improvement over 1 to 2 weeks. The first changes usually show up as less nighttime restlessness, fewer awakenings, reduced thirst at night, more stable morning readings. Even before numbers drop significantly, sleep quality often improves first. That's a good sign. It means cortisol is coming down and insulin signaling is stabilizing. This mineral is not a replacement for diet, movement, or medical care, but it fills a critical gap that most nighttime routines miss. It supports the exact systems responsible for silent overnight glucose rises. In the outro, I'll summarize how this mineral fits into a nighttime blood sugar strategy and who should be cautious before using it. Nighttime blood sugar spikes can feel random and discouraging, especially when you go to bed doing everything right and still wake up high. But once you understand what's happening inside your body after sunset, the picture becomes much clearer. At night, insulin sensitivity drops, stress hormones rise, and the liver becomes more active. This combination creates the perfect environment for silent glucose increases while you sleep. The mineral we talked about doesn't force blood sugar down. Instead, it supports insulin signaling, calms the nervous system, and helps the liver release glucose more appropriately during the night. Remember, progress doesn't come from chasing perfect readings. It comes from understanding patterns and supporting your body during its most vulnerable hours. If your fasting numbers have been frustrating, this is one of the missing pieces most people never get told about. If you found this helpful, subscribe for more science-based explanations that actually make blood sugar easier to manage. And in the next video, I'll break down the foods and habits that can completely cancel out these benefits if you're not careful.